So the first pasuk in the parasha says, "Va'ata Tetzaveh et bnei Yisrael," and you, referring to Moshe Rabbeinu, command bnei Yisrael, "V'ikhu elecha shemen zayit zach," and you shall take pure olive oil. Katit lema'or lahalot ner tamid. What does lahalot ner tamid mean? Because we're talking about lighting the menorah in the Mishkan. The previous parasha talked about all the kalim that were made for the Mishkan. Now we're talking about the internal workings of the Mishkan and the service, the avodah, because most of this week's parasha talks about the Kohanim, who were the little workers inside this incredible Mishkan, this Mikdash Me'at. So, Lahalot Ner Tamid, talking about the Kohen Gadol when he lit the menorah. Of course, the first Kohen Gadol was Aaron HaKohen, and we talked previously about how he lit this menorah every time with the same energy. Every single time, as was the first time, he continued with the same energy. Unlike human nature, I should say, where people their enthusiasm tends to wane. So, Lahalot Ner Tamid means that when the Kohen Gadol lit this menorah, he had to wait till the flame was strong and self-sufficient, and then he had to step away from it. It wasn't enough to come and light the menorah and hope that it's going to spark off properly and then walk away. Part of the mitzvah was make sure that that flame was burning brightly and it was a strong flame, and then the Kohen Gadol would walk away. What lesson can we learn from this? Now, I always talk about parents and teachers and children and talmidim. This is a fantastic musar for any parent or teacher. Because a parent, the natural instinct for a parent is to bring up a child, but as part of their bringing up the child, they feel, this is very natural for a parent, they feel that they need to always give some sort of input and always give some sort of always have the child to be reliant on the parent in some way. The problem is that very often parents, and it does happen with teachers as well, they don't want to proverbially cut the apron strings. It means the child will always have to come back to the parents for some reason or another. The Kohen Gadol is teaching us the opposite. That when a person gets involved with any type of responsibility, could be for a child, could be for a talmid, there has to come a time when the parent lets go, or the teacher lets go. It says, look, or he or she says, look, I have now done my job. I will always be there for that child. I will always be there for that talmid. But now I'm going to take a step back, because now I've made that child sufficient. Now that child can walk by themselves. Like there was a comedian, a Jewish comedian, who used to say that parents are very often too overbearing on children when it comes to things like walking. When a child is 10, 11 months old, maybe he's past the 12-month mark, and the child is not walking, and the parents, come on, let's walk. And this comedian said, listen, the child is going to walk. If the child is normal, he's going to walk. You never see an adult crawling around on the floor like this, can you help me? The child's going to walk already, just leave him, let him be. There's got to be a time when you have to let go. The Kohen Gadol is teaching us, get the flame, that it's proper, it looks fantastic. Now you've got to take a step back. You've got to sever that contact. You must always be there for that child. You must always make yourself available. But to be overbearing, to be connected, that you cannot rely on anything without me, that you must not do. And a parent, it's very difficult for a parent to do that. It's very difficult. It just means, now maybe my child won't need me anymore. Now, that's not a chesaron, that's not a lacking of the child. That's not the child's problem. That's your problem. You're making that in your mind when you do that. When you feel, oh, my child's not going to do it, he can't do anything without me. Take a step back, remove yourself, and cut that apron string. That's from Rav Shamshir and Paul Hirsch. Says this beautiful, beautiful insight. And the one thing that everyone talks about in this week's parasha of Tetzaveh is that Moshe Rabbeinu's name is absent, conspicuously absent, because Shemot, Vayikra, Bamidbar, Devarim, chock full of Moshe Rabbeinu's name. And this one, nothing. Right in the middle of the Mishkan, nothing. Why? Classic answer, because Moshe Rabbeinu, when the whole fiasco with the Egel HaZahav happened, which Bezrat Hashem will be talking about next week in Parashat Ki Tisa, when the whole fiasco happened, Moshe Rabbeinu said, Mecheni na misifracha, erase me from your book. If you're not going to forgive the Jewish people, then forget it. I want out. Moshe Rabbeinu put himself on the line for Klal Yisrael. And what happened? Hashem said, okay, even though Hashem forgave the Jewish people, Hashem takes a tzaddik at his word. Because tzaddik gozer v'Hashem mekayem. When a tzaddik says something, even if later the reason for the tzaddik's objection disappears, whatever the tzaddik has said has to come true. Classic example of this is Yaakov Avinu. When Yaakov Avinu was accosted by Lavan, and Lavan, who was his horrible father-in-law, said to Yaakov, where are my idols? Because Lavan's idols had disappeared. And anyone who knows anything about the Torah will know that who really did take those idols was Rachel, Lavan's daughter and Yaakov's wife. She took the trafim, she took the idols. Yaakov had no idea. Yaakov said, whoever took those idols will die. Now of course, if Yaakov would have known it was his wife Rachel, he would never ever have said such a thing. Rachel was his love. That was the wife that he had. He had Yosef and Binyamin from Rachel. He was the one who of course he loved Leah as well, and Bilhah and Zilpah. But Rachel was, in a way, the apple of his eye. So of course he would never have said such a thing if he would have known. But Yaakov said something, and Yaakov of course was a tzaddik. So what Yaakov said came true, and she did die. She died in childbirth, aged 36 years old, if I'm not mistaken. It's incredible. You think about people in the Torah living for hundreds of years. Avraham Avinu 175, Yitzchak 180, Yaakov 137, Rachel 36. Women are supposed to live longer than men. What happened there? So you see, it was not fortuitous. It was because of Yaakov's kilala, Yaakov's curse. So Moshe Rabbeinu said, erase me from your book. But Hashem ended up forgiving the Jewish people. But Moshe Rabbeinu said it, it's got to come true. And it was this book, this parasha of Tetzaveh, that Moshe Rabbeinu's name was erased from. Now there's a beautiful hint to this in the words Mecheni na misifracha. Sifracha can also be read Sefer Chaf. Misifrecha. Because the last word in the word misifrecha, which means from your book, the last letter from that word is Chaf. Chaf is numerical value 20. So you could read it, erase me from your 20th book. What is the 20th parsha in the Torah? Parsha Tetzaveh. So it was implicit in that word that that was the parsha that Moshe Rabbeinu was going to be erased from. But based on what we just said now about a parent or a teacher or in fact a leader who has to remove himself from the picture, you can explain this very beautifully, says Rabbi Frand. Because of all the parashiot, okay, you got this hint, the 20th parasha, but why? Why not Parashat Kitisa? That's why we have the whole incident about the Egel. Why not any other parasha? Something in Devarim. Why you right now in the middle? Lemay nafkamina. Well, why this particular parasha and not anything else? So you can see now the answer. I'll explain to you what the answer is based on what we said about cutting the apron strings. This parasha, in the main, talks about Kohanim. The Kohanim who ran all the services in the Mishkan, and ultimately they ran the Beit HaMikdash along with the Levim. But this parsha is the quintessential Kohen parsha. Talks about the begadim, what they used to wear, what the kapara was for each particular garment. Now Moshe Rabbeinu had given up his right to be a Kohen. He had abdicated from the Kehunah. How was that? Because he objected to Hashem that he was being called on to be the leader of the Jewish people. He refused outright. Because he said, look, I have a brother who's older than me, 3 years older than me. He's been in the business much longer than me. I'm a newbie. Who knows about me? I was hidden away in Pharaoh's palace. Nobody knew who I was. But my brother was a Navi. He was a leader. So why are you asking me? Why asking the little kid? Ask the older brother. He's going to be Yoresh from his father. He's going to inherit from his father. And he objected to be the leader. Now, of course, we know that ultimately Moshe Rabbeinu became the leader. But Aaron, Moshe Rabbeinu lost the Kehunah. Moshe Rabbeinu could have been the Kohen Gadol. But this went to his brother, Aaron. Aaron did all the service in the Mishkan. He was the leader. He was the one who ran the whole business. Now, Moshe could very well have turned around and commented on this parasha and said, look, you see all this beautiful avodah, all these wonderful things, the Kohanim with their clothes and the Kohen Gadol, he had 8 garments, the regular Kohen had 4 garments, the whole thing, and the kapara, and there were the messengers for the Jewish people, and everyone relied on the Kohen Gadol because he was the advocate. He was like the lawyer for the Jewish people, the defense attorney. So you see all this stuff? Yeah, that really was supposed to go to me. Because I was the one who was asked by Hashem to do all this work. And I should have been there at the top, in the middle of the Mishkan, leading the service, going lifnai lifnim, going into the Kodesh HaKodashim every year. That should have been me. But you know what? I gave it up because of my brother. So really, you have to give me respect. That's what we would think a person would do. That's what we would do if we had something that we could have had and that we gave it over. We always have these lost regrets. There's that famous line, I could have been a contender. It's from some film, I don't even know which film it is, Baruch Hashem. But there's that line. It means that, something, I could have been there. For whatever reason, I'm not there. But I could have been there. And you always go into these proofs. Really, the person who's doing the job, I could have been doing that job because I trained him and I'm better than him. But I decided whatever it is. But Sachakol, at the end of the day, you're not there. He's there, not you. So what's all this, all this talk? You could have been a contender. This sounds like talk with some people who sit in the pub and they say, I could have been the manager of this football team. Or I could have been this movie star. I could have done it. I decided not to do it. What is this shtuyot talk? You could have been. Either you are or you're not. There's none of this pub talk. Now if we relate that to Moshe Rabbeinu, technically he could have had every right to say that. Because it was the truth. He did offer up the position. And he could have said, Aaron, he's doing it, but, should have been me there. But not Moshe Rabbeinu. Because Moshe Rabbeinu was Anav Mikol Adam. He was the most humble and modest person. So what did he do? Not only did he not say anything, but he cut himself off. He said, I gave it to my brother, I'm not even opening my mouth. I'm not going to say that should have been me. I'm not going to say I could have done it better. It's nothing to do with me. I gave it up with a full heart. It's for my brother, Guzun to hate. I want him to be there. I want him to be the Kohen Gadol. Now, what evidence do we have? Because this parasha is talking 99% about Kohanim, Moshe Rabbeinu's name is not mentioned. Why? Because he doesn't want his name mentioned there. He doesn't want to be part of the action to say, I could have done it. It could have been me. He cut himself off. He cut the apron strings. He removed himself completely from the picture. That's what a person has to do. If you're going to move out the way and let the other person get on with it, don't stay there and keep coming back in every 5 minutes. When your children get married, you should be there for them. Of course you should be there for them. There's no question. You're supposed to come back every few weeks and, stick your nose in and interfere with them and tell them how to do things. Oh, you don't know anything about getting married, I'll tell you what it's like to be married. Now, of course, nobody's saying you've got to just move to another country and have nothing to do with them. Of course not. But to be overbearing, to not let go, that's not what the parasha is teaching us. Parasha is teaching us there's got to be a time when you step away. And when you step away, you've got to step away completely. Let them get on with it. Moshe Rabbeinu let Aaron get on with it. He did it for a purpose, because he knew that Aaron was the man for the job. Now, there's not going to be no regrets. There's not going to be no pub talk. There's not going to be nothing. It's Aaron's domain, and that's it. I think I've made the point clear. I hope I've made the point clear. But there's still a question. You see, Moshe Rabbeinu put his life on the line. He said, cut me off from the book. I don't want any... As far as he was concerned, his name could have been cut out of the Torah completely. Nothing to do with it. Hashem saw to it there was just one parasha in the Torah. But if you think about it, what was Moshe Rabbeinu doing? Moshe Rabbeinu was giving himself up for Klal Yisrael. He was saying, I identify with them. My soul is bound up with them. If they don't exist, if they are going to be killed, if you're going to finish with them and start everything anew, then what's the point of me being here? I only live for them. I'm completely I'm batel, I'm nullified to their cause. No Jewish people, no Moshe Rabbeinu. If I am not with them, then all you have is va'ata, you. Va'ata tetzaveh, you. I'm like a you. I'm like a nobody. But if there's a Klal Yisrael and they need a manhig, they need a leader, then I'll do that job. But I have no raison d'etre other than being a part of the Jewish people and leading the Jewish people. So that's what he was saying. And for that, he gets cut out of the book. Hashem should say, look, Moshe Rabbeinu, well done, you stood up for my children. So I will reward you. You know what, I'm going to mention your name more times to show you that you do matter. So why did Hashem cut his name out? Why was he punished? Moshe Rabbeinu deserves a punishment? He did something wrong? He stood up for his people? Mapitom. How are you going to answer that? The answer is that this was not a punishment. This was not a punishment at all. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. Because any person who looks through the parashiot and see Moshe time after time, and suddenly, boom, there's a whole Sedra, 101 Pesukim, no mention. It's going to flag up with that person. They're going to say, well, what's happened? And if they delve into it, they'll realize, you know why his name is not there? This is a testimony to Moshe Rabbeinu. This is a testimony to the man. Because the reason why his name is not mentioned is because he stood up for you. For you as a Jew, he stood up for you. The fact that his name's cut out of there, you see why his name's cut out? That's because of you. That was made because of you. Because he stood up for you. We're not going to put his name extra in the Torah. Or give him... No, this is the greatest testimony, the greatest reward possible. We'll show you, it's like an emblem. This parasha is an emblem to show this is what he was willing to do to stand up for you, to make sure you have a kiyum, you have a reason to live. The fact that you're here at all is because of him. What greater testimony than to show you what he was willing to sacrifice. He was willing to sacrifice everything for Klal Yisrael. That's what Parashat Tetzaveh talks about. It's the badge, it's the emblem of a leader who was willing to give everything for every Jew, even for one Jew. That's a leader. Now, we mentioned that the begadim, the clothing that was worn by the Kohen Gadol and the other Kohanim, these items of clothing were significant because each one had a different kapara. Each one atoned for a different thing. You had the front plate, which was for azut panim. We talked about that in the previous shir on Tetzaveh. And there was something called the me'il, which was a coat, beautiful coat, lovely light blue, very striking garment. What was the atonement that this me'il bought? This me'il, this coat, was an atonement for the sin of Lashon Hara. They had to have an entire garment just for the sin of Lashon Hara. This gives me a perfect excuse to tell one of my favorite Lashon Hara stories, to show you the severity of Lashon Hara. I have said this story previously, but I think it really brings out the point. And I do believe this is a true story. I heard it from Rabbi Wallerstein. I'm pretty sure, I don't think you could have made this up. There was once a doctor, a very famous surgeon in America, and he was famous because he never ever lost a patient. Performed hundreds of operations, every one of them lived. There was once a child who he performed an operation on, very complex operation, and the child survived the operation. And as usual for doctors, they check the child even after the operation, as they do with the Brit Milah. The mohel will check the child after the Milah on a number of occasions. So this doctor checked on this child, and it turns out that the child developed a fever, a very strong fever, and the child became very, very ill, and the child died. Now, of course, that meant the doctor's reputation was now sullied. He'd lost his first patient. What did this doctor do? He said, I quit. I'm no longer a surgeon. I'm not going to perform any operations. That's it. End of story. No matter what anyone said to him, he would not turn his back on his decision. That's it. Finished. So he went to his office. He was packing all the stuff into a box, and he heard a knock on the door. previous to this, he didn't just quit like that. He decided to make some inquiries because he wanted to see if it was really his fault or not. So he called in his staff, because he had a very strict regimen with all of his staff. They had to have checks before they performed any operation. They had to get a correct amount of sleep. They had to be very careful about their sterility, etc. So he called in every single member of his staff, and he cross-checked them. He said, did you have the right amount of sleep? Did you perform this particular action? Did you have your instrument sterile? Did you do this? Did you do that? Every single member of staff checked out. He could not point the finger at anybody. That's when he decided to resign. And he got this knock on the door. And he turned around and he shouted through past the door. He said, whoever it is, I'm not interested. I'm leaving. Don't even try talking me out of it. And it was a girl, and she said, please, doctor, please let me in. I need to talk to you. No, I don't want to talk to anybody. Don't even. I'm leaving. And he wouldn't hear of it. But this girl was very insistent. She said, please, just give me 2 minutes of your time. So he felt sorry for her. He opened the door. He said, yes, can I help you? She said, doctor, you probably don't recognize me. He says, you're right, I have no idea who you are. He said, doctor, let me explain. I am the girl behind the scenes who is in charge of sterilizing the equipment. When any member of your staff uses a scalpel or any other instrument, they give it to me, and I make sure that they're sterile, and I hand them back to them, and then they use it. He said, yes, well, what do you want? She said, I have to tell you that I feel I'm responsible for this child's death. He said, what are you talking about? She said, let me explain. When you were performing the operation, and I was given the order to sterilize certain instruments, I happened to be in a very traumatic state because I was on the phone to, I don't know, my boyfriend, my fiance, somebody like that, and we were having a big argument. I was I wasn't really with it, and I don't think I sterilized one of the instruments properly, and so I really feel it's my fault. I don't know where to begin to say I'm sorry. And the doctor couldn't believe it. He'd cross-checked every member of staff. He'd missed out this girl, and she was the one who was responsible for all those people, for the fact that he lost his job, or he gave up his job, and most importantly, the fact that this child lost his life. What do we learn from this? That a person can be in this world, he can be doing everything right. He can have the right position in life, he can have the right people behind him, everything could be going swimmingly for him. But all it needs is for one instrument to be not sterile, and havoc is let loose. Which instrument does a person use day in, day out? They use it for complex operations. They use it all the time, willingly, for great things, for prayer, for learning Torah, for teaching your children, for spending time with your wife. It's the mouth. That's the instrument that we use. And if that instrument gets dirty, just a little bit, how can we use that instrument for our prayer, for learning Torah? Because you're infecting everything. You're using a scalpel that's got germs all over it. How can you perform an operation with a scalpel that's got germs all over it? How can you use a tongue to pray to Hashem when it's not sterile? When you've used it for talking about other people, when you use it for nivel peh, for bad language, when you use it to hurt people, that same tongue has to be used for very high purposes. That's why it's so important to realize that it's the same mouth that's going to be used for holy things. Don't make it dirty. Don't soil it. So easy. And if you do soil it, make sure you sterilize it. Make sure you do teshuvah. Make sure you resolve to take on, not to say Lashon Hara. Simple as that. I say simple, it can be hard. But dos is dos, as they say in Yiddish. That's that. There's no heter for Lashon Hara. There may be situations when you can say Lashon Hara. They happen to be few and far between. You have to learn when you're allowed to say Lashon Hara, if at all. But the vast majority of times, Lashon Hara is Lashon Hara for a bad cause, not for a good cause. People always say, I know when I have to speak Lashon Hara or not. I know that I have to talk bad about this woman who's going on Shidduchim. I know, I've got a heter to do it. Leave me alone already. Have you learned? Shmirat al-Lashon? Have you learned the Chafetz Chaim's book to know when you can say Lashon Hara? You just assume that if somebody is you're on a shidduch with somebody and they're not ra'oi and they've got some problem, you have to tell the whole world. There's ways you have to say Lashon Hara. And if you don't know when and when not to say Lashon Hara, then you have to ask a rabbi. You can't just say, I'm allowed to. No, it's not simple as that. Keep the instrument sterile. That's what the meal is teaching us. Right, I want to finish off now. It's early. I know it's early. I want to talk a little bit about Purim, because at the end of Tetzaveh we have a special maftir, the maftir of Zachor, to remember Amalek and to destroy them. We say it in this particular parasha because it precedes Purim. It comes around the time of Purim. It's all connected. Moshe Rabbeinu's birthday, Moshe Rabbeinu's day of his passing, Amalek. It's all connected. Purim. Now, previously we've talked about Amalek. If you want to hear about Amalek, I gave a share previously called Nemesis Rising, all about Amalek. That has the whole history there. I'm going to give you a little pointer here about Amalek and the connection between Amalek and Purim. Of course, we know the connection is with Haman was from Amalek. But Amalek had to perpetuate something which needs to be destroyed. It's not everyone who's bad that needs to be destroyed. Because Amalek needs to be utterly wiped out. Even the memory of Amalek. It's not enough that we dispose of them, even their memory has to be wiped out. It says, Timche et zecher Amalek. Wipe out the memory of Amalek. It's a very strong language here. What is it that they did so bad? Now, of course, historically, we can talk a lot about Amalek. We had Agag, who was the king that Shaul HaMelech felt to kill him, and Haman, and Hitler, and all the other Amalekites we had during history. But there's one point which it was brought to my attention recently, which they demonstrate, which really sets them apart from any other nation, from any other person. Because Amalek demonstrated the midah, the characteristic called leitzanut. What does leitzanut mean? Leitzanut, we know, if you translate it literally, it means joking. But that's really not what it means. Because nowadays we use the word leitzanut to if somebody jokes around or mucks around, we call him a letz. A letz, he's letzing around. It means he's like a joker, like somebody who wants to, to have a good time, to poke fun. But leitzanut really means something deeper than that. Leitzanut means cynicism. Because Amalek was the king of cynicism. He was the master cynic. Why was he a cynic? Because Amalek is beyond just being a non-believer. Because you could not believe in God and believe in another God. Or you can say, I don't believe in the God of the Jews, I believe in the God of the Muslims. It's still one God, but you have a different take on it. Amalek didn't believe in Hashem and didn't believe in any other God. He didn't believe in anything. He was a total atheist. His take on the world was that people can do anything, anytime, there's no ramifications, you do what you want, it's a free-for-all. Nothing matters, nothing counts, it's just life is one long party, and if you're not getting along with the party, make sure you get your own way, make sure you fight to get to the top. They totally didn't believe in anything. And part of that is that they scorned and they mocked people who did believe in Hashem and who do believe in Hashem. And like I always say, you don't have to be from Zera Amalek. You don't have to be an Amalekite proper to subscribe to this point of view. Because anybody can take on being an Amalekite. Fair enough, if you're not from the seed of Amalek, you don't deserve to be killed. But anybody can become like them, can be shaykh to them, can subscribe to their point of view. Plenty of atheists out there in the world, I'm not sure if they're all Amalekites, but they're certainly in that vein, they're certainly behaving like them. There are plenty of people in this world who are cynical. If you say the 10 plagues were an act of God, splitting of the Red Sea was an act of God, the Reed Sea, was an act of God, they'll turn around and say, what are you talking about? It was a wind. The sea split, there was a big wind, and that plague of blood, that's not blood, that was red soot. It was red sediment that went up to the top, and all these riots, all these proofs they bring, because they want to scorn, they want to mock. That's Amalek. And if you take it seriously, then you're an idiot. You really believe that there were 10 plagues? Frogs? What is that nonsense, frogs? Big arbe coming from the sky, big locusts with poison and everything. You really believe that? Believe all these firstborn died? What nonsense! Tommy rot. That's what they'll tell you. There's a natural explanation. That never happened. Come on. We want a scientific explanation. You'll hear this again and again and again. That's subscribing to Amalek's point of view. That is leitzanut. That's cynicism. And if you believe in Hashem and what He did, then you are a fool. They'll take the edge of Yiddishkeit. They'll make it hefker. They'll make you believe that you're an old-fashioned person. You know, sometimes you have a moment of inspiration and you really get into your Yiddishkeit and you're flying and you're going with it, and maybe you've taken an extra mitzvah, and then somebody will come along and burst that bubble, and then suddenly, boom, you're back down again. Not only are you not keeping the mitzvah that you said you'd take on, not only have you forgotten now about your inspiration, but now you're doing averot. Because the person burst the bubble. Because they made some cynical, scornful remark. That is what Amalek wants to perpetrate. Asher korcha baderech, he came along when you were most vulnerable and he cooled it down. He came along and he attacked the people who were straggling at the end of the Jewish people. All the people who were weak, they didn't know what they were doing. They were outside, they were at the edge of the camp of the Jews for a reason. And those were the people they attacked. The people who were not strong with their faith, them were the people they attacked. And they said, what are you doing? You're part of these people? Old-fashioned? Believing in God? What for? Get with it! We've got everything you want. You don't need a God. There's no such thing. We've got TV, we've got internet. You want a God? Those are good enough for you. What's wrong with them? Get with the times. Get with the modernity. That's Amalek. He'll steer you away. He'll burst that bubble at any opportunity. You've got to watch out. So what has this got to do with Purim? So I had a thought when I was preparing this shiur, that on Purim we behave not seriously. We put on costumes. We try and break out of our molds. We try and take the edge off the reality. We try and get to a state where we cannot differentiate between Haman and Mordechai. We think Haman is blessed and Mordechai is cursed. We totally, everything is topsy-turvy. Why is that? My thought was that we are countermanding Amalek. Amalek wants to burst our bubble, we're going to burst his bubble. We say, you want us not to take things seriously? We'll show you about taking things seriously. Now I'm going to put on a Star Wars mask. Now I'm going to dress up as Mordechai. I'm going to dress up as Haman. I'm going to do everything the other way around. You want to scorn? I'll give you scorning. I'll give you mockery. But I'm doing it L'Shem Shamayim, because I know what's real. I'm not scorning to burst the bubble to make sure that I'm affecting somebody else's avodat Hashem. I'm going to scorn, I'm going to mock, I'm going to be elate L'Shem Shamayim, because I know what's real. Because I know exactly what the picture is. I think that's why we do all these things on Purim. We're turning everything upside down. Because that's what Amalek wanted to do for us. But we're doing it L'Shem Shamayim. Seeing as it's Purim on Wednesday night, I'm going to do something unusual. I don't want to leave you with depressing thoughts about Amalek. So I want to tell you a joke. If you want to tell it at your Purim Suda, you're more than welcome. I read this and I thought it was cute. So there's this man who goes and buys a parrot, and it's one of these speaking parrots. Not any parrot. This is an amazing parrot. This is not a parrot that says pretty Polly. This parrot talks. It's got intelligence. It's proper. You can have a conversation with it. So he pays a phenomenal sum. He takes the parrot back home, and it starts talking, and they're developing a friendship. And then the parrot starts getting very irritating, and he starts making fun of the guy who his owner, and starts using bad language and insulting him. And the man says, "Look, I bought you. You're my parrot. What are you doing? How dare you use bad language?" So the owner tries to start censuring the parrot, saying, "Look, you can't." The parrot continues, it gets even worse and worse and worse. And the owner gets fed up. And you know what he does? I would never ever advise you to do this. He takes the parrot, goes over to the fridge, opens it, puts the parrot in the fridge, and closes the door. Now this parrot starts screaming and cursing from behind the door for about 2 minutes. Then he stops. And the owner's thinking, what's going on? Maybe I've hurt him. And then he hears a quivering and trembling from behind the fridge. So the owner says, "Okay, look, I'm sure he's had enough now." He opens the door. He pulls the parrot out. This parrot's not particularly cold, but he's quaking, he's shivering, like he's shaking. So he says to the parrot, "You had enough now?" He says, "Yes, I had enough. I want to say, I'm really sorry. I'll never do it again. I'll be a good parrot. Forgive me. I'll never..." He says, okay, I'll forgive you. I see you had a very quick change of mind. So the parrot says, "Yes, trust me, I'll never do it again." And you see the parrot turns around, he looks at the fridge, and he says to me, "I'm so glad you took me out of the fridge, but can I ask you one question?" The owner says, "Yeah, sure." He says, "I know what I did, but what did the chicken do?" Afreilechem Purim, Purim Sameach. May all your dreams come true. Daven for whatever you want. Hashem will answer your prayers. Please God, which you see the Bilam B'Tabing this year, Techef or Miyad.